Welcome back. Next steps are always on the horizon, so let's take one and get into the stacking of our main walls. Although naturally, this is YouTube, and there has to be some amount of lead into that event. So we're actually going to start with making sure we get our subfloor nice and smooth. As it turns out, my nail gun doesn't like to fully sink every single nail. And since we're about to slide a bunch of styrofoam and cardboard across the subfloor, we're going around and making sure all the nails are fully seated first. I would try to argue for a new nail gun, but that would be both an unnecessary expense and simultaneously what my finance committee would encourage me to say. In any case, with that part done, we've got a lot of cleaning and stacking to do. When we did our foundation pour, we tried to tape off the tops of every block to keep the interlocks clear and free of concrete to accept the next row. And while we reduced the amount of concrete we had to pull out, we didn't get all of it. So between that and loading up the floor with what we need to stack, we have a morning's worth of work ahead of us. Now, none of the block work is a huge exertion. Each block is light and easy, but it does take time, and so too does moving the blocks around as full bundles. We had stacked all of these out of the way so we weren't working around them before we were ready for them, but I do wish we had been smarter about the way we did this, as it did end up being a rather significant amount of time just getting things staged as we needed more block. But live and learn. Now, once staged, this stack was much like the first. We simply started in the corners and we worked our way to the common seams. Alila and I were able to tag team a bunch of these blocks, and the actual stacking zoomed by. However, one twist to this stacking is that we have been adjusting some of our window sizes from the original plan. So what had been slightly considered common seam placement is no longer in the realm of ideal. So there is some consideration being paid to if or where some of these seams can be shifted to on this round of stacking. Overall, the stacking is pretty quick. There are some areas where we had gotchas and leftover learnings from the foundation, and that caused this first row to slow a bit, but eventually we did find our groove. And then we hit the point of the window-laden rows. The process doesn't change all that much. Stack from the corners, cut at the common seam or the window, lay in some rebar, and repeat. What does change is making sure that the measurements and cuts around the windows and the openings are at the right level, they're square, and they're accurate. While at a common seam, we'll get to add some spray foam to take up any miscuts. Around the windows, you end up cutting almost exactly to a buck dimension, and that's true regardless of whether you're using a wood buck or, as we've used here, the foxbuck product. When we get to the windows specifically, we had some that were right at the block seam, and others we had to cut midway through the block. Now, for cuts not at the seam, we first need to get a good clear working space, and then I use a simple line laser to set a target height for the bottom of the opening. I marked along the laser, and then ended up trying several different methods to cut along the line to figure out what worked. I tried the reciprocating saws, I tried hand saws, I tried circular saws. Each had their pros and cons, and I never really settled on the right one, except that one thing I did learn was to try and cut them while they're not on the wall where possible. The inside was always a good cut, but trying to make it through both sides of the block and making it at the same level is a little bit of a challenge. Being able to mark one side, take the block down, and working comfortably on the floor at the other side of the block was quite a bit better result, even if not necessarily the fastest. One good tool to always have in your arsenal for these openings is a good rasp, and they come in several useful forms, whether you're going for one that looks like a hand file, a big flat paddle, or an angle grinder attachment. But they are a fantastic means to bring the openings into flatness if you're working with some wonky cuts or you're not exactly square. We're about to jump ahead a few days here, and we're in late June of 2024 for this part of the video. And you'll see shortly that we finally managed to source some braces, enough to get started anyway, and we're at that point on the 4th and 5th rows of getting up onto planks to work. Now, one thing we did not expect for this whole build process was the challenge of sourcing these braces. We found several places that were willing to sell us blocks. That was no problem, and we even considered Lightform, Fox Blocks, Nudura, Build Block, all readily available to our area. No single place we talked to, though, had more than 20 braces available for us to use, and the one source we did find within 250 miles that had enough cost us almost twice as much to rent them as it would have to buy them. We did end up lucking out and finding 2 racks of these plumb walls on Facebook Marketplace. They were still stupid expensive, but at least we aren't tied to a rental clock at this point, and the supplier of our blocks was able to get us one more set of the taller giraffe braces to help with our high side walls. In the end, it worked out, and we'll be able to either sell these braces again, or maybe we can look into being a rental outfit to turn an eventual profit. We'll see. In any case, working from the braces takes a little getting used to. It takes a few days to really trust that a few screws into the webs and foam and a couple more on the floor are really going to support multiple people and the weight of leaning concrete on the wall. But having been on them multiple hours now, if not days, I'm pretty sure these braces would move the world if you asked them to. Now, if you followed this series along at all, you know that I end up working solo quite frequently. If you're going to be taking this on in a similar fashion for yourself, get ready for your legs to be burning by the end of each day going up and down the ladders. If you have someone around just to pass up some blocks, you'll save more time than you might assume. Even better if you can scrounge up competent help that can cut on the ground level and hand them up ready to place. I'm tremendously lucky to have Alila able to fit both of these roles as needed, though slightly unlucky that her availability on the weekends isn't quite as open as mine, as she's still maintaining her teaching schedule and some of her side quests outside of standard business hours. But I'll take what I can get, as some of these tasks can edge into tedium without the breaks. Now, in full disclosure, I've been stalling a little bit with this story before revealing one of my big blunders on this build. Once we unloaded all of the braces from the racks, we wanted to move the racks out of the way so we weren't always stepping around them as the build progressed. Fair enough. Until you, and by that I mean until I, give inadequate instruction about hand signals for lifting and where not to place your body in relation to machinery. The result was a big, massive overreaction to get the machine away from Alila, and then I realized I wasn't able to stop that momentum before, well, time-lapse missed the impact, but you can see the aftermath of the bucket crashing into the wall. And the biggest takeaway for me is this. It's that I need to do better to remember that I have more awareness of the goals and of the risks than most of the people who come to help, including Alila. And with that comes a responsibility to remember that I have to communicate those goals and the gotchas to everyone. If the rest of the team isn't on the same level, me being the smartest person in that particular room means absolutely nothing. On the bright side, I've already built this wall once, and I can do it again. And as you might expect, we are learning and gaining experience, and the rebuild took less than an hour, including the teardown of the broken blocks. Now, the penultimate item I'd like to share with this video is the bending of the rebar for the lintels. Now, the lintel rebar adds the necessary reinforcement for the concrete that has to span over any of the horizontal openings, the windows, the doors, the walkways. We're building prescriptively following the Fox block guides, and for this application, we're lucky the lintel stirrups are number 3 rebar instead of the thicker number 4 that is in our walls. And luckily, this is something I can easily do one-handed as shown, where the number 4 bars would take both hands, and the number 5 would be a good bit of my body weight to bend this. Not awful for 1 or 2 items, but we had 168 stirrups to bend for all of our openings. And it really was overall about this point in the process of the build where I needed to take a break from filming, so we're going to make a pretty big jump forward in a few minutes. Turns out that setting up and moving the cameras is not a small amount of time, and we're starting to fall a bit behind our target timeline. But before we jump to that final real-time update, I do have to do that obligatory request to interact with the buttons down below and comment if you're willing to leave one. I would love to reach that milestone of 1,000 subscribers and start getting more incentive to keep the cameras rolling and have more reach in that good old algorithm. In any case, the stirrups are all bent up, so let's check in with the progress in the days leading up to the concrete pour. So, finally recording an update. I sort of stopped doing the time lapse because the house got to the point where you couldn't really see anything going on. And then I got too lazy to do all the camera moving around. So you'll see here we have a lot more going on. So let me go ahead and get this flipped around and I'll point out what we've been doing. So we are standing in the garage right now. So we've got those doors kind of framed up and we've got just a simple shed roof going all the way up. So we've got what's going to end up being roughly a 14.5 foot wall here, pitching down to 10.5, 11. And then as we get into the house, we're going to have a little bit of a step up into the house. And those are just 8.5-foot walls that pitch up to 12. Crawl space entrance, which we've seen previously. This is going to be where our mudroom is. And utility space, master bath, walk-in closet, master bedroom. We're going to walk out through a hallway here. This is our main entry. So just a standard door here, a couple of side lights, a couple of closets along either side. And then we'll be able to see right out through a sliding window here to our back patio. We'll then come through and we're going to be right in the kitchen off to the right. Big sliding door over there. Guest room behind a wall over in the corner. Our secondary guest room / office. And our living room with our feature window kind of framed out. So we are going almost floor to ceiling and almost wall to wall in this room just to be able to look out into our scenery, our forest here. So we've got all our bracing set up. We've got our high transoms in place. And now we're just kind of doing some of the finishing touches. All our rebar's in, our window bucks are supported, pretty much everything that we have to do except for the strapping. Still has a few more to go, a little bit of fill-in on the foam. And then we have to put in some sleeves for sconce lights and electric outlets and any services coming in and out. So hopefully before too long, we've got our concrete scheduled and our walls become a little bit more solid. So if that's something you're interested in, as always, stay tuned.